that's fine. Oh, that's fine. Yep. Yeah, no, everything should be off. Oh, yeah. Good. Good, good, good. Yeah, yeah. That's fine. Yeah, let me know.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight. A few weeks ago in Sunday morning worship, we talked about forgiveness, and our congregation had an opportunity to use the little yellow sticky pads that you'll see on the corner of your pews for something that they would like during the season of Lent to give to the Lord for forgiveness or for help in forgiving someone. That cross was covered with yellow sticky notes. I collected them and I have been praying over them. I did not read them. We've been placed in this gold box, which they've been in my office. Tonight, after the service, as I exit, I will take those with me, and there is a little fire pit out there, and we will burn them. I share that with you because tonight, if there is anything else that you would like to add, you may do so. You will not be asked to come forward. Instead, what I will ask you to do is, when we end in silence and when you are ready to leave, you exit and take that sticky note with you. Whether you write anything on it or not, you just take it with you and you may place it in the fire with all the others. So that is available to you at this time. This is a service in which we will end in darkness and in silence. And we thank you for those who are joining us online. Please be aware that at some point you may not be able to see very clearly, and we apologize for that, but we thank you for joining us. We are in the spirit of Good Friday. Let us begin. Last night in our Maundy Thursday service, we gathered with Jesus in the upper room. And we went through the service of the Last Supper. And we left our Jesus. He was in the Garden of Gethsemane. He was in the Garden of Olives with his disciples. There was the kiss from Judas who betrayed him and a legion of soldiers who had come to arrest him. Tonight we continue the story that began in a tradition of tenebrae or darkness, descending with Jesus into the depths of our own stories of grief, disappointment, and betrayal. So the band of soldiers and their captain and the officers of the Judean authorities seized Jesus and bound him. First they led him to Annas, for he was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was high priest that year. It was Caiaphas who had given counsel to the religious authorities that it was expedient that one man should die for the people. Simon Peter followed Jesus, and so did another disciple. As this disciple was known to the high priest, he entered the court of the high priest along with Jesus. And while Peter stood outside at the door, so the other disciple, who was known to the high priest, went out and spoke to the woman who guarded the gate, and she brought Peter in. The woman who guarded the gate said to Peter, "Are you not also one of his disciples?" The man said, "I am not." And now the servants and officers had made a charcoal fire because it was cold, and they were standing and warming themselves. And Peter also was with them, standing and warming himself. The high priest then questioned Jesus about his disciples and his teaching. And Jesus answered him, "I've spoken openly to the world. I have always taught in synagogues and in the temple where all Jewish people come together. I have said nothing secretly. Why do you ask me? Ask those who have heard me what I said to them. They know what I said." When he had said this, one of the officers standing by struck Jesus with his hand, saying, "Is that how you answer the high priest?" And Jesus answered him, "If I have spoken wrongly, bear witness to the wrong. But if I have spoken rightly, why do you strike me?" Annas then sent him bound to Caiaphas, the high priest. Now Simon Peter was standing and warming himself, and they said to him, "Are you not one of those disciples?" And he denied it and said, "I am not." And one of the servants of the high priest, a kinsman of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, asked, "Did I not see you in the garden with him?" Peter again denied it, and at once the cock crowed. Then they led Jesus from the house of Caiaphas to Pilate's headquarters. It was early. They themselves did not enter the headquarters so that they might not be defiled for the Passover. So Pilate went out to them and said, "What accusation do you bring against this man?" And they answered him, "If this man were not an evildoer, we would not have handed him over." And Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and judge him by your own law." And the religious authorities said to him, "It is not lawful for us to put any man to death." This was to fulfill the word which Jesus had spoken, to show by what death he was to die. Pilate entered the headquarters again and called Jesus and said to him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And Jesus answered, "Do you say this of your own accord, or did others say it to you about me?" Pilate answered, "Am I a Jew? Your own nation and the chief priests have handed you over to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingship is not of this world. If my kingship were of this world, my servants would fight, that I might not be handed over to the religious authorities, but my kingship is not from the world." Then Pilate said to him, "So you are a king?" Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. For this I was born, and for this I have come into the world, to bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth hears my voice." And Pilate said to him, "What is truth?" After Pilate had said this, he went to the religious authorities again and told them, "I find no crime in him, but you have a custom that I should release one man for you at the Passover. Will you have me to release for you the king of the Jews?" They cried out again, "Not this man, but Barabbas." Now Barabbas was a robber. Then Pilate took Jesus and scourged him. And the soldiers plaited a crown of thorns and put it on his head and arrayed him in a purple robe. They came up to him saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" and struck him with their hands. Pilate went out again and said to them, "See, I'm bringing him out to you that you may know that I find no crime in him." So Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. And Pilate said to them, "Behold the man." When the chief priests and the officers saw him, they cried out, "Crucify him, crucify him." And Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and crucify him, for I find no crime in him." And the religious authorities answered him, "We have a law, and by that law he ought to die, because he has made himself the Son of God." When Pilate heard these words, he was the more afraid. He entered the headquarters again and said to Jesus, "Where are you from?" But Jesus gave no answer. Pilate therefore said to him, "You will not speak to me? Do you not know that I have power to release you and power to crucify you?" And then Jesus answered him, "You would have no power over me unless it had been given you from above. Therefore, he who delivered me to you has the greater sin." Upon this, Pilate sought to release him. But the religious authorities cried out, "If you release this man, you are not Caesar's friend. And everyone who makes himself a king sets himself against Caesar." When Pilate heard these words, he brought Jesus out and sat down on the judgment seat at a place called the Pavement, and in Hebrew, Gabbatha. Now it was the day of preparation of Passover, and it was about the 6th hour. He said to the religious authorities, "Behold your king." And they cried out, "Away with him, away with him, crucify him." Pilate said to them, "Shall I crucify your king?" And the chief priests answered, "We have no king but Caesar." And they handed him over to be crucified. So they took Jesus, and he went out, bearing his own cross, to the place called the place of a skull, which is called in Hebrew Golgotha. There they crucified him, and with 2 others, one on either side, and Jesus between them. Pilate also wrote a title and put it on the cross. It read, "Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews." Many of the Judeans read this title, for the place where Jesus was crucified was near the city. It was written in Hebrew, in Latin, and in Greek. The Jewish chief priests then said to Pilate, "Do not write the King of the Jews, but this man said, 'I am King of the Jews.'" And Pilate answered, "What I have written, what I have written, I have written." Then 2 bandits were crucified with him, one on his right and one on his left. Those who passed by derided him, shaking their heads and saying, "You who would destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself. If you are the Son of God, come down from that cross." In the same way, the chief priests also, along with the scribes and elders, were mocking him, saying, "He saved others. He cannot save himself. He is the King of Israel. Let him come down with the cross now, and we will believe in him. He trusts in God. Let God deliver him now, if he wants to. For he said, 'I am God's son.'" But the other criminal rebuked him. "Don't you fear God," he said, "since you are under the same sentence? We are punished justly, for we are getting what our deeds deserve. But this man has done nothing wrong." And then he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." And Jesus answered him, "Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise." please join with me in singing the first verse of Were You There? I think it's page 77. Set what? 288. Thank you. When the soldiers had crucified Jesus, they took his garments and made 4 parts, one for each soldier, also his tunic. But the tunic was without seam, woven from top to bottom. So they said to one another, "Let us not tear it, but cast lots for it to see whose it shall be." This was to fulfill the scripture. And they parted my garments among them, and for my clothing they cast lots. Let us sing the second verse. Were you there when they nailed him to the tree? Were you there when they nailed him to the tree? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they nailed him to the tree? So the soldiers did this. But standing by the cross of Jesus was his mother and his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. And when Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing near, he said to his mother, "Woman, behold your son." And then he said to the disciple, "Behold your mother." And from that hour, the disciple took her to be in his own home. Please sing the following verse, the next verse. Were you there when in the sight? Were you there when they pierced him in the side? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were From noon on, darkness came over the whole land until 3 p.m. And about 3 o'clock, Jesus cried with a loud voice, Ele, Ele, lema sabachthani. That is, my God, why have you forsaken me? When some of the bystanders heard this, they said, this man is calling for Elijah. At once, one of them ran and got a sponge, filled it with sour wine, put it on a stick, and gave it to him to drink. But the others said, Wait, let's see whether Elijah will come to save him. And then Jesus cried again with a loud voice and breathed his last. It is finished. And he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. Please let us sing the next verse. Were you there when the sun refused to shine? Were you there when the sun refused to shine? Sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when the sun refused to shine? After this, Joseph of Arimathea, who was a disciple of Jesus, but secretly for fear of the religious authorities, asked Pilate that he might take away the body of Jesus, and Pilate gave him leave. So he came and he took away his body. And Nicodemus also, who had first come to him at night, came bringing a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 100 pounds of weight. They took the body of Jesus and bound it in linen cloths with the spices, as it is the burial custom of the Jews. And now in the place where he was crucified, there was a garden. And in the garden, a new tomb where no one had ever been laid. So because of the Jewish day of preparation, as the tomb was very close at hand, they laid Jesus there, wrapped in cloths of care. when they laid him in the tomb. Were you there? Were you there when they laid him? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they laid him in the tomb? And so we find ourselves at the tomb, a place of burial. Please dim the lights. So this is where we leave Jesus on this night, in the tomb. But as people of faith who know the rest of the story, we know that Sunday is a coming.